The spring game format is set. It's a week away. And for some reason, Ohio State fans are trolling it. I don't get it, but we're going to get into it right here on this episode of Locked On Wolverines.
You are Locked On Wolverines, your daily podcast on the Michigan Wolverines, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Friday. We are back and doing it. Locked On Wolverines podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. I'm your man on the ground, Isaiah Hole, publisher of Wolverines Wire through USA Today Sports Media Group. First, Kyle Whittingham explained the format of the upcoming spring game, which is in just over a week. For some reason, it's become an opportunity for Buckeye fans to troll. We'll get into that, I guess. And then we're going to go more into the construction of the next Michigan basketball team, the transfer portal where Dusty May stands with some top prospects. Finally, for the first time, we're actually going to talk some Michigan hockey as the curse remains intact for the Maize and Blue in the Frozen Four. All right, let's get to what Kyle Whittingham said about the spring game. Let's start there, and then I'll give my reaction to that, and then we'll get into the Buckeye trolling that's happening for some reason. I don't know. But all right, Whittingham says, the main thrust is a great chance for us to get a good, in-depth, concentrated look at the 2s and 3s. There's going to be a lot of ones that don't participate. I mean, we're not going to put a guy in there that we know what he can do, and he's where he needs to be and has played hundreds of snaps here. I mean, there's no reason for that. So it's a chance to showcase the 2s and 3s in as close to a game environment as we can structure and manufacture. It will be 2 separate teams. We're trying to divide the teams up equally. Each position coach will divide his group into an A and B group, and A is not necessarily better than B. It's equal division, and then you draft the head coaches of each team, which are going to be determined. I haven't decided who's going to be the head coach of the Maize and Blue yet, but they'll pick, for example, say the Maize team picks first. So the O-line will take the A group, then the B group, that leaves the B group for the Blue team. And then the Blue team has the first pick on the running backs, and it takes about 3 minutes to go through it. But the bottom line and the final analysis is we want a team that's very evenly divided. It's not 1 versus 2s or anything like that. So, okay, let's start there. First, obviously, I don't love it, but I mean, in terms of covering it is why I don't love it. And I guess entertainment value to some degree. But I don't hate it in terms of what the coaches are doing, and I'll explain. So, oops, I just realized my light's a little off. There we go. I think that it's fine in terms of what they're trying to do and see what kind of depth they have. Because ultimately, just like, to translate, essentially, they will know what they have with a lot of different guys. So this is the 15th of 15 practices. So the way they're looking at it is we already know what these guys can do. We already know these guys are starters. There's no reason to get them potentially injured. There's no reason to do all that and showcase them when we know what they're capable of. So let's go ahead and try to essentially establish some depth. And we're going to do that in a creative way that allows us to field something that's at least moderately entertaining. And, for the people who get to be there or choose to be there, whatever. And we're going to hopefully see some guys rise up, right? Which I think makes sense in terms of that's generally what you see in a true spring game. I mean, last year wasn't like a true spring game, but like you saw Donovan McCulley get 1 target and he was done. You saw Bryson Kuzdal, however, get a ton of run and he burst onto the scene. As did Jalen Hoffman, though we saw less Jalen Hoffman, but it was an opportunity for someone who wasn't necessarily considered to be Kuzdal was behind Micah Kapana on the depth chart before that spring game. And then that spring game maybe changed that, right? At least changed the public perception of what Bryson Kuzdal could do. Going from a guy that if he has the ball in his hands and it's not Michigan's up by 30, something's wrong. And then he ended up starting a game, and then he ended up playing the bulk of the minutes against Ohio State. So you have that part. I think it makes it hard for someone in my position to, as everyone always asks, what should we glean from this spring game? Every year, how should we watch it? What should we glean? Well, it's hard to glean anything from something like this because it's not really going to tell you anything about the standing of the team, which is fine if you're internal at Michigan. But it's a different deal if you're in, my shoes as someone who's evaluating to try to give you a response to, hey, this is what we saw, or you who's watching to just see with your own eyes, right? And try to get like some kind of understanding of what the team might be this upcoming year. But weirdly, like, that's not where this discourse ends, because it should be. But for some reason, Ohio State fans who have been like commenting and quoting my tweet a ton about him saying like, this is what it's going to be. They're trying to turn it into a narrative because they can't help themselves, right? Their insecurity knows no bounds. They can't help themselves but make it something bad for Michigan. And they're trying to make it sound like Michigan's soft. Like some of the responses, like it took me a while to kind of even understand what they were getting at, but they were all getting at the same thing. And they're trying to make it sound like Michigan's soft because of this. Listen, it's a freaking practice. Michigan can do whatever it wants to do with the practice, especially this time of year. It's not unlike, in a bye week when you have a bunch of different practices that essentially work out the, they have the opportunity practices and such like that. That's essentially what this is. It's an opportunity practice. And I would venture to guess most, if not all teams do this. Michigan is just doing it publicly in the spring game. So number one, like there's people saying like, oh, you want to see Bryce pass for another 67 yards. Stupid. You're probably going to see Bryce in the game because number one, they don't have a lot of quarterbacks to throw out there, especially for a whole game. So yeah, you're almost certainly going to see plenty of Bryce. It's just that you might not see Bryce throwing to Andrew Marsh as much as you might see him throwing to Channing Goodwin or Celeste Moa, maybe not even him. I don't know. Travis Johnson, right? So there's that, number one. Number two, for those who are trying to say, oh, they're soft, they're not going full bore in a spring game. Like, it's the spring game. Yeah, they went full throttle and a bunch of guys got injured as a result. That's smart. It has no bearing on the toughness or lack of toughness. And let me tell you one thing about Kyle Whittingham. If you think that they're going to get softer under Kyle Whittingham rather than just at least get back to the same level of what it was under Jim Harbaugh, then you are just living in delusion land, my friend, because you've seen, if you've watched Utah, they are a tough team. They were a tough team in the trenches. And Kyle Whittingham saying the strength of the team is an area in which most of us were looking at and saying, like, that's probably not the strength of the team. That's probably a weakness. They probably don't have guys there. And instead he's sitting there being like, nah, we're loaded there. Like, we got guys who can scratch and claw and do all this stuff, right? Even Chip Patterson, CBS Sports, put out like essentially each team's inflection point as far as it comes to how the college football playoff race will stand going into next year. And for Michigan, it's the defensive line. And it also acknowledges, like, Kyle Whittingham fields tough defensive lines. So if you want to take the fact that he's looking at it and saying, like, Trey Pierce, I know, we know what you got. You guys don't need to do this. What we need to see is the Travis Motens of the world. And you're sitting there saying to yourself, they're soft. Instead of recognizing, like, they're trying to actually build more depth in real time with all eyes on them. Then, like, I don't know what to tell you if you don't understand that. So have fun with your fun little narrative and all of that. And they're having plenty of fun. I see Ohio State fans trying to say stuff like, they're only celebrating basketball because football. Like, no, Michigan's celebrating basketball because they won a national championship, something that Ohio State can't sniff at the moment. And when I say at the moment, I mean longer than that. But, to each their own. Everyone has their own different stages of grief. And despite Ohio State beating Michigan last year, they have become no less insecure about their standing. So be it. All right, let's move on. I want to get into some basketball. before we get into hockey, because we're just covering everything. It's been the April of Michigan in so many ways. So let's get to basketball, and we'll do that here in just a moment. But before we do, this is Moving the Game Forward by Mazda. For those who know, the score never tells the whole story. The final game of the 2025-26 season was the national championship game, and the two leaders of the Wolverines were Yaxel Lendeborg and Elliot Cadeau. Lendeborg managed 13 points despite playing at less than 50% per his own admission, trudging through even the greatest hardships and just obviously a ton of pain, and he still made a difference for the Wolverines. Cadeau had an up and down tournament, shined in the most, in the game that meant the most, managing 19 points and willing Michigan to a title, even as UConn forced the Maize and Blue to abandon its own version of what it wanted to do and play its game. There are more than these players, than the highlights, the early mornings, late night runs, constantly showing up for their squad on and off the court. The all-new Mazda CX-5 moves the same way, with the space to connect, a bold new design, and more intuitive technology, so you can stay connected to the road in every position that you play. The all-new Mazda CX-5. More to move every side of you. Get Locked On Wolverines ad-free with the Everydayer Club plus members-only Discord access. Join at lockedonwolverines.supercast.com. All right, things are heating up for Michigan and one of its top targets in the transfer portal. We talked yesterday about Juke Harris, who is, there's not a consensus number one guy in the portal. But he ranges from 1 to 6, depending on where you look. He's number, I think 6 in 24/7, but he's number 1 on Rivals, and the industry ranking has him as number 3. And yet, Jamie Shaw of Rivals put in a prediction that Michigan will end up with Juke Harris, the shooting guard for Wake Forest, comes in at 6'7". He almost certainly would be taking that Yaxel Lendeborg wing type of role with the Wolverines should he sign on. But I mean, I see some predictions out there saying like, oh, you know, low confidence or medium confidence or what have you. I know it's not, I don't think it's a full done deal yet, based off of conversations that I had yesterday, before the show, after the show. But I think Michigan's in a really good position and likely will close that deal this weekend. So that's big for Michigan, because not only is it a PR win, which, like, whatever, who cares? Like, it's great to have PR wins, especially after a national championship, but you just want to prolong the dynasty potential, essentially. Like, it's not a dynasty yet, but it could be, right? You want to prolong that potential. And I think that getting a player of his caliber would. And there's still other things that they have to answer and try to figure out, of course. Like, they're still working for Flory Bidunga, who is visiting Louisville, is going to visit Duke. Michigan is still in the thick of that. I don't believe that the JP Estrella pickup has anything to do with him or Morez Johnson. Speaking to a well-connected colleague, it is my belief that he will be more of a like a role player, you know, like I've seen people say like, oh, he's the Will Shetter. No, he's not Will Shetter in terms of like what he would come out and do. But in terms of being like a sixth man, yeah, he very well could be that. I mean, granted, Roddy Gale was kind of more of the sixth man. He's going to play a bigger role, JP will, than Shetter did. But I don't think he is necessarily a starter. So ultimately looking at it, because that was one of the things, is trying to figure out how this would look. I think that push comes to shove, they will. You know, it's kind of hard to say when someone else is on someone else's campus. I think that Michigan will find a way to close Bidunga. I do, which would give Michigan the 1-2 in the portal if they were able to manage that. There's also the chance that they're just kind of operating under the radar as well, given that no one really even knew about the Estrella one, right? Like he just kind of popped up out of nowhere. They tend to do that. It just kind of surprised people. But I think that they'll find a way. It still leaves me a little bit like, you know, Bidunga is he's 6'10", was the center for Kansas. But again, like not the same length, not the same style as having Mara. Michigan lost Malik Cordell to the transfer portal yesterday, which we talked about being a possibility. So I think that, you're going to be playing a different style of game, but I still think that they'll be fully capable. And let's just use the hypothetical if they do get Bidunga, who, again, I'm not saying is going to be in. I just say that I think once push comes to shove, barring some you don't know what's going to appeal to every single person just because Yaxel said, hey, I don't need all of the money. I just want to be on a national championship team that can develop me the most. Essentially, I want to be a part of a true team. Just because he accepted that doesn't mean someone else is. But I think that if you're looking at it and saying, okay, Elliot Cadeau, Trey McKinney, Juke Harris, Merez Johnson, who still hasn't made a public decision. Certainly that could go another way, but it sounds more and more like multiple people have told me that he's likely to return. And then Bidunga or someone else, right? Because they're going to have to get a center one way or another now. I think that if you have that as your starting five and then your backups, the reserve players that come in are, Oscar Goodman and Brandon McCoy and JP Estrella, maybe another one or two of the guys that they already have. I think that's pretty stellar. I think you're working with a lot there. Yeah, I think that's great. I do want to add that I've seen some stuff online about what's his name, Tyron Stokes, the number one player in the 2026 class. I do not believe that Michigan is seriously considering him based off of conversations I've had. Now, could that change? Yeah. I would also say that based off of the limited conversations I've had, that I don't think that despite the stargazing and seeing the consensus number one guy in the recruiting cycle out there, I don't think that the juice would be worth the squeeze. And sometimes that happens, right? I just don't think he would be a good fit for what Michigan's trying to do. Now, doesn't mean it won't happen. Certainly they could disagree. And we'll revisit that if that happens. We've had that happen, right? We've had that happen with certain players on football in particular. I think I came on here and said, yeah, based off of conversations I had, I don't think I would want Jamar Browder. And then I've had some of those same voices that were against it initially tell me oh, actually, it all ended up working out. And it all ended up working out in a way that is beneficial for him and beneficial for Michigan. Okay, cool. So we'll see where that goes. But I don't think that there's anything to that at the moment. Could that change? Absolutely. But that's the thing. I have to always have that caveat, because if I don't have that caveat, everyone just thinks that it's set in stone some way, somehow, not understanding that when you're dealing with whether it's high school kids or even college kids, that things can change on a dime. Heck, things could change. I'm 44 years old. Things can change on a dime for me. Once I get something in my head, as ridiculous as it might be, just as dumb as it might be, is I'm going to spend $200 on a Marshall speaker so that I can listen to the Game of Thrones score while I'm going to bed. And I sit there and say, that's a ridiculous thing to do. And then 24 hours later, there's a Marshall speaker sitting in my house. It's, there's a level of impetuousness to humanity sometimes, especially someone who's younger than I am. So, all right, let's move on. Let's talk a little bit of Michigan hockey. They lost 4-3 in double overtime in the game that wouldn't end. Was certainly an instant classic, but let's talk a little bit about that game and the Michigan hockey season. Let's do that here in just a moment. But before we do, it's tax time. But for a lot of us, the old way of doing taxes is a lot. Trying to book an appointment, that's not the most convenient. Sitting in a waiting room with a stack of papers, emailing back and forth, and wondering if they really get your situation. But this year, you're getting a major upgrade. Intuit TurboTax now has in-person locations nationwide. You can meet face-to-face with a real tax expert, and your documents get uploaded straight to your TurboTax app on the spot. And just like that, you're done. Your TurboTax expert works to get you every dollar you deserve while you get real-time notifications as you go about your day. It's the relief of walking in and meeting a real person and walking out knowing your taxes are being handled right. Head to TurboTax.com/local to find a store near you and book your appointment. All right, we're going to continue on here momentarily, but before we do, workplace chaos, deadline stacking up, inbox overflowing, and the one position you still have to fill, sitting open. When the pressure's on and you need the right hire, this is a job for sponsored jobs. Indeed Sponsored Jobs helps you reach the people who actually fit what you're looking for. Skills, experience, location, so you're not just hoping the right candidate stumbles across your post. And here's a stat that says it all. In the minute that I have been talking to you, companies like yours have made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. So if you're hiring, spend less time searching and more time interviewing candidates who check all your job boxes or all your boxes with Indeed Sponsored Jobs. And listeners of the show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. Just go to Indeed.com/podcast right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? This is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs. It was a 4.5-hour game last night in Las Vegas, and I don't know. I had a sense of foreboding once Denver managed to tie the game up with just a couple minutes left to go. That kind of started to go away a little bit once Michigan seemed to be the more aggressive team in both overtimes. It was just a crazy game. Michigan doubled up Denver 52-26 in terms of shots, but their goalie, Johnny Hicks, was just insane. Now, I don't think Michigan got the best shots off. I thought Denver had a little bit more finesse to what. I say that in a game that was not finesse at all. It was like you could tell within 30 seconds of the game, it was going to be a brawl. And it was. It absolutely was. And, but like Denver got off shots more that were harder to defend, where it felt like a lot of the Michigan shots were just like right at Hicks, like shooting directly at the guy. And so it just didn't feel like Michigan was able to really take advantage of a lot of you're getting into a lot of sets and things. And so credit to Denver and its defense, because it just never really felt like Michigan was able to really fully execute its offense. But, and I know TJ Hughes getting injured late. I think he came back in, but he just kind of was a non-factor in the two overtimes. If he was back in, I don't know if he came back in or not, to be honest. And that, that's disappointing, but, it was a crazy game. And, for Michigan to get that many times, that many, shots off and just not be able to get anything to go through. Yeah, I thought the officiating wasn't great. Like how different would it have been if they're at the end of the third period, that ticky-tack call on, who was it? I don't even remember who it was. The ticky-tack call that ended up putting Denver on a power play, and then Michigan ends up getting the slashing call and ends up going on their own, well, 4-on-4, and then having basically it kind of didn't work out great to have like 30 seconds at the end of the third and 30 seconds at the beginning of the first overtime to be on a power play themselves, right? That just doesn't give you a lot of capability, especially when Denver's able to clear the puck to the other side. I don't know. I just think that some things could have gone different, but it's disappointing, right? 15 years kind of felt like, all right, the number one overall seed. I know Denver has been incredible, having won championships 2 years ago, 2 years before that, surpassing Michigan, all of that stuff. It just kind of felt like this was going to be the year that Michigan was going to be able to come through and get that elusive national championship they hadn't won since I was in high school. And yet again, I mean, when I say 15 years since the championship, last time it's been in a championship game. It's not 15 years since last championship, just last championship game appearance. They can get to the Frozen Four, but they can't seem to get beyond that. It's the opposite of basketball. And yet it's going to persist at least another year. And that's really disappointing, because it just really felt like this was going to be the time. And you kind of just don't know what to do about that if you're a Michigan hockey fan, where it's just like you just keep on trying to break through a brick wall. And even when you find the weaknesses, and even when you've got the better hardware to be able to try to break through that brick wall, you just can't do it. I just don't know what you do about that. So, disappointing end, super entertaining game. Certainly had my stomach in knots, and I've like barely watched any Michigan hockey this year. But like you would have thought that I've been like into it every single game. Just having watched it, but and I checked up on the Everydayer Club afterwards this morning, and I was like on Twitter late last night and just seeing just how many people were just like so in it and just like the heartbreak that came after it. And I felt it too, just as all of you did, even though I haven't had I haven't had my finger on the pulse of it, but still, some of the I think other issues, and one of the issues I think that really Michigan faced, and I didn't see this talked about, they were winning. I don't know where it ended up finishing off, but they were winning the face-off battle. But then like in that second overtime in particular, it just felt like because Michigan kept the puck down in the Denver zone and just seemed like, they kept on, like finding themselves having face-offs right in front of the goal, and Denver was just winning every single one of them. And considering that the TJ Hughes goal came off of a face-off like that, and obviously you just don't want to waste that momentum of already having it there in front of the goal and be able to get in your offensive set and then having to rush down and play defense, try to get the puck back, get back on sides, all that kind of stuff. And then get in your set just to find yourself again with the face-off and have to do the same thing over again. It just feels like a lot of wasted effort. And I think that maybe played a little bit into the doom of it, whether it be fatigue or what have you, that ended up costing the Wolverines in this one. Just maybe a small part of the game that I think that maybe could have played a difference in it. So nonetheless, good season. Not what anyone had hoped. Certainly, it's especially maybe disappointing if Wisconsin wins it all, just because it's like to have another Big Ten team end up taking it all instead of, the Yukon of hockey, then okay. I don't know. All right, that's going to do it for us today. We'll be back next week as we start counting down really, truly towards the spring game and get to learn just a little bit more about the football program before under Kyle Whittingham before we go into the long off season, start to really pivot towards recruiting and all of that. So anyhow, thanks for watching. Thank you for listening. We will talk to you again soon. Peace.